All right. Hi, everyone. So welcome to Beyond Barnard Summer Colloquium 2021, the Pre-Law Personal Statement Overview Workshop. I am Lindsay Granger Weaver, one of the Associate Directors on the Advising and Programs team here at Beyond Barnard, and also the department's Equity Lead. And welcome. Today, we're going to talk about personal statements. First, this is kind of the menu for the day. First, we'll talk about a little bit about the other application essays that you'll be asked to write as part of your application, just to contextualize the personal statement, and then jump right into what exactly a personal statement is, how to figure out what to write about, and some general writing tips, and then also just some big picture things about the application in general, and then how Beyond Barnard can help you out. So first, types of law school application essays and what is a personal statement. So for law school, you will be typically you're responsible for 3 types of essays. So the personal statement, which brings us all here today, the diversity statement, and then supplemental essays. And so we'll work backwards on these. So supplemental essays are essays that are unique to a specific school. They're typically short answers. So like 50 words is far more common end of the spectrum than the 500 words. And then sometimes there are no words at all. I have seen some where it's just a box that's like, fill in this box with something that you want us to see. And so you like bust out your Sharpies and start to draw. But, they're really questions that the schools individually want to know about you. You are responsible for typically 2 to 3 per school. They say that they're optional, but you should submit at least one of these supplemental essays, and you don't get to see what they are until the applications open at the beginning of the new cycle, which is September. And then the diversity statement are essays that really describe what's unique about you and how this uniqueness could contribute to the law school class at the school that you're applying to. Typically, when you think of diversity, like specific demographic markers come up, like race, ethnicity, sexual identity, gender identity, and those are absolutely things that you can talk about, but that's not the be all end all or even the purpose of the diversity statement. It's really, if you think about the admissions folks putting together a puzzle for their incoming class, they want to make sure that it's not homogenous. They want to make sure that all the pieces are different, but fit together in a way that will make sense. And so the diversity statement is where you can talk about different aspects of yourself that make you stand out, but also help you relate to people who are different from you. And it's typically shorter than a personal statement, but longer than supplemental essays. So in some schools will say this is optional, but you should submit something. And sometimes they'll also give you either a prompt or a word count for it. So keep that in mind as you draft this. The supplemental essays you can't really draft right now, but you can think of ideas that you may want to add, and we'll talk about that later. But the diversity statement is something that, along with the personal statement, you should start to think about prior to even the applications opening. So the personal statement really answers 3 fundamental questions of who are you, why do you want to go to law school, and what do you plan to do with your legal education? And it also provides a foundation for the other writing that you have to do. So this is one that if you have a great idea for it, you'll then use your diversity statement and your supplemental essays as complementary pieces so that you're forming a cohesive application narrative, as opposed to either having very disparate documents, which is one end of the spectrum, or having very redundant documents, which is another end. And neither of those are good strategies to have for your documents. You want to make sure that they all come together to provide different pieces of yourself, to provide like the admissions reader with a holistic view of who you are outside of your GPA and LSAT scores. So your personal statement's important and something that we recommend doing first, which is why we're doing this focus workshop, because it can then be used to build on your other essays. So we get a question, I think we hear a lot, is the difference between, or asking us to tell the difference between a law school personal statement, and a college essay, which is typically the other application essay that you are familiar with. And they serve a similar purpose in the sense that they're used for admissions. They're used to get you in, they're used to help have the admissions readers understand more about you. But content-wise, they're not the same, because the law school personal statement is supposed to be much more focused on law school. A personal statement or a college essay, for especially somewhere like Barnard, is meant to be very broad, meant to show that you're well-rounded, intellectually curious, able to really take advantage of all the different experiences that a school like Barnard would have to offer. For law school, they want you to focus on law. So it's really like, for graduate school in general, law school specifically, it's really the time to narrow in and focus on these specific pieces of the application and talk about what could help you move forward. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. So next, now that we're all on the same page about what this document is, we'll talk about what to write about, how to figure out what to write about. And there'll be a lot of brainstorming questions in this next section, but again, you will get the recording, so no need to feverishly write things down. So as long as you answer that, who are you, why law school, and what do you plan to do with your legal education, the actual framing of this and the topic is up to you. Okay. So some people will write about experience they have with law. Some people will write about influential courses or activities. We see a lot of applications, personal statements that talk about work in either SGA or research they've done in their courses, specific internships or community-based work that they've done that's law related. But that's certainly not the only thing that you can write about. Kind of as long as it's meaningful and as long as the experiences that you share and the things that you share about yourself are things that resonate with you, that will come across. Sometimes there is this habit, at least in like first drafts, to discuss, to talk about things that you think the admissions readers want to see. So you think they want to see that you have done community involvement. So you like try to pull teeth to make this one time you did this one thing be meaningful enough for a personal statement. And that's really not the purpose, and that's not what they want. And it's also pretty clear when it's a very thin experience. And so you want to write about something that drives you, something that is motivating to you, meaningful to you, means something, because it comes across and it makes it just a much more compelling essay. And it also helps the readers understand the fit that you see yourself in their school. And it also, you know, if it's something that you're trying to make it work and trying to make it fit and trying to make that happen, that's clear, but it also could be a sign that this school may not be the right one for you. So some brainstorming questions, and I think brainstorming falls really neatly into two buckets. And so this first one is like law related factors. So really make sure that you're touching on those points from those previous questions of who, what, and why. So some things, you know, what made you want to be a lawyer? Like, what was your initial introduction to the field, and what made that introduction attractive to you? Also thinking through, why do you currently want to be a lawyer? So after that initial, say you're watching, I was about to date myself and say watching Ally McBeal, which is probably an older show for many of you. What from there made you do the research and be like, oh, okay, yeah, this could be something I actually want to do. What currently drives you to study law? Study and practice are very different. So why do you want to get into that? And also, if you plan to study law, but maybe not practice, this can be somewhere that you kind of flesh out those ideas of if you want to go into policy, want to go into politics, want to go into like legal research or legal writing or professoring, like all of these, that part can come into this like study of law. You know, meaningful law related experiences. If you've had internships or volunteer experiences or shadowing or networking events there that have put you in touch with the legal profession, these can be things that you write about here. Also, if you've, you know, been in the legal system yourself, either as you see a lot of essays from folks who like translate for their parents or even in the system themselves in other capacities, you know, this can be something that you write about here. And then like if there's a specific area of law, why do you want to do that? So what drives you in that particular direction, knowing that there are a ton of different directions to go? And so these aren't all of the questions about this, but I think that these are a really good jumping off point where if you just allow yourself to truly brainstorm these, then you'll start to see some themes, you'll start to see some patterns in your work, and you'll also start to see like which things you actually really want to write about and which things are like, that's there, but that's not really something that I want to discuss further. And so next, it's this next bucket is really building the framing and just like kind of framing out the narrative, making sure that they still understand you in relation to this, the important part of the law part. So, thinking about the specific impact you may want to make. And I mean, this could relate to law in the sense of like why you want to say, if you're really interested in helping unhoused populations, why do you think that law would be the right avenue for this? What's the context there? What's the background there? Even non-legal experiences, because you can even pull through some threads and see if there are any overlaps between, those and some of the legal experiences that you may have had. Considering also aspects of your identities or background that have factored into this career choice. And so that may tread into diversity statement territory if it's not completely focused on the study and practice of law. But I know like last cycle, for example, a lot of people, just given the general unrest, were very interested in, using going to law school as a way to make the criminal justice system work for their own communities. And so that's one thing that you can kind of tie into a personal statement that would work for this, and also without like kind of taking away from a diversity statement, if that makes sense. And then you can think about things like who you're doing this for, why you're doing it. Do you have mentors or role models, or even relatives or family members, or are you, the mentor to someone where this would make a difference for like you and them in the community? And so again, these aren't all of the framing and building of narrative questions, but they're ones that if you take your time with them and really think through some of the responses and then compare them to these law related ones, you get to like a nice Venn diagram, you see my fingers, of things that overlap in terms of, this is the overall context, this is the law part, and this makes for a strong narrative for my personal statement. And so now that we've kind of touched on some brainstorming of like how to figure out what to write about, here's some writing tips. And all of these come from a lot of the advising that Beyond Barnard has done in the past few years with law school personal statements. And so definitely learning from your peers here. So the first for me is that drafts are absolutely your friend. Don't expect to do this all at once. Don't aim to do this in one shot, because it's something that requires a lot of care, and a lot of care when writing tends to mean a lot of drafts. It also just lowers the expectations that you're going to have the perfect thing once and then keep it moving. This is a process. And so starting early, like why we're doing this in May as opposed to doing this in like August, is because you want to think about this as a process and start to build to have a really strong personal statement come September. When you have a draft, walk away, come back, see how it looks. But always coming back to it at least once on your own and sharing with other people is just a really great writing strategy. Fully explore your good ideas. And so from all of that brainstorming, you are likely to come up with a few different threads that you can go on for your personal statement, or different things that feel like they might be good, make for really strong personal statements. And so it's good to play around with them. I wouldn't say write like 10 personal statements and then pick and choose later on. But like outline ideas for sure. See, which ones make the strongest case for you, which ones resonate with you the most. You can talk to advisors, you can talk to peers about which ones would feel most impactful. And then fleshing them out will also help you see if maybe something would be better a diversity statement. Something could also maybe save for a future supplemental essay. But like outlines and bad drafts are insanely helpful because you really want to feel comfortable with what you are, with what you're submitting. Let me see a question in the chat. The recording will be shared tomorrow. Right, so next, you'll want to be authentic and truthful in your personal statement. Really, I touched on this before, but write what is true to you and not what you think schools want to hear. So a lot of times we see people who, their draw is corporate, or their draw is doing something, more along the lines of like business related, general counsel, something like that. But in their personal statement, they talk about wanting to do public interest because they feel like that's what the school wants to see. And that's not accurate at all. I mean, they tell us, no, we know that not everybody who's applying here wants to do public interest, and that's fine. Just be honest, talk about what you want, talk about what's driving you to do this work. But also just, it comes through for sure, and just the examples that are chosen and the way that things are described. And so make it easy for yourself and find a way to authentically discuss your experiences. And then keep it personal. And so, I mean, in the title, personal statement, it says it's personal, but very often it's a lot easier to write about a situation without centering yourself in it. And so we see this a lot with folks who've had law-related internships, especially ones that are like legal aid or outreach, where you're in communities, working with people one-on-one in pretty dire conditions, and more time is spent discussing those conditions and discussing the impact that it had on the writer. And so by center yourself, really just making sure that you are the main character. And so instead of just saying what you saw, discuss how you felt, discuss how that impelled you to act, discuss certain things that you may have done or things that you took from that experience that now put you in this place to apply to law school to address some of those things. It may take a few drafts for sure. Yes, I'll talk about that. Yes, in a moment. It may take a few drafts to get there, but drafts are our friend, right? That's what we talked about. So just making sure that as you're writing, understanding that you need to be the person in this main, you need to be the center of your story. And I got a question, can you talk about the balance between personal writing and academic tone? And the tone here, that is a really good question. And the tone, it's not like you're writing a paper, so it doesn't have to be as academic. It can be more casual and more personable because you want them to get a sense of your personality through the writing. However, it still needs to be well written and follow all the grammar and syntax and all of that. But if you're somebody who writes in analogies or extended metaphors, things like that, then that's fine here. You have more of a creative license for that than you may in an academic writing. It's also not like a personal statement for like a PhD program that is very academic, because it is an example, it's more of a writing sample, an example of your academic writing and academic tone. Here, I think the line is making sure that you're not writing like, hey girlfriend, like that's not the tone, but it's just to have like your personality in it. And I can speak further on that if that didn't answer the question. Once we get to the Q&A part, I can say a little bit more. So in these last two writing tips are really about the school specific pieces. They are, sometimes you want to situate yourself in this school and say why you want to apply, and it comes across as being kind of a fan person, saying like, oh, this is amazing, I want to go there so bad. And it comes across as marketing copy for the school, as opposed to you telling them why you would be a good fit, you saying why, explaining why specific aspects of their school are more attractive to you. They know that you want to go there since you applied, but it's just a matter of really digging deeper and saying, this is why I want to go there. It goes into this next part of making it actually specific. So name the names of professors or institutes, research centers, clinical opportunities, partnerships between the school and other organizations that resonate with you because they will help you become the lawyer that you want to be. And so effusive praise, not great. Being very specific in like, I want to attend your school because this professor teaches this class or does research in this research center or has published here, something like that ties into your narrative of why law and what you hope to do with it, because that's a much more compelling case. Right. So the general timeline, the ideal timeline for both the writing and then just the application is to have very strong drafts of your personal statement and diversity statement by the start of fall semester. So this summer, if you're planning to apply coming up in this next cycle, this summer should be spent really honing these documents to make sure that you've got them in good enough shape so that in September, once the supplemental essays are available, you can see what you may need to add to them, what parts you may want to put into those supplemental questions since you're seeing them out there. And then there'll be in good enough space so that you can focus on making the supplemental essays as strong as the personal statement and diversity statement, but you also have the wiggle room in case, a prompt for the diversity statement or a prompt for a personal statement wants you to answer something a little more specific than the general, which isn't typical, but can happen. Like some schools will say, tell us about yourself and why us. And so that why us piece that isn't always necessary will have to go in there. So you want to just leave yourself some time to make sure that you're not rushing to finish these. By the end of October, just having all aspects of your pieces of the application finalized. So having the essays, all of them in ready to submit mode. This may be a good time to nudge your professors and your recommenders since they get busy. Sometimes they are the last piece of the application to get submitted to LSAC. And generally, like you want to make sure that by mid-September, by Thanksgiving at the very latest, you hit submit, and then you can just sit back and relax in the ball of anxiety while you wait for the admissions decision, because it's anxious, it's tough, something that you really want to do. And so you're in a lot of company because it's something that everyone will be in that wait and see mode. But having things in by mid-November puts you in a really good timeline for these like rolling admissions deadlines. They'll be in a good spot for you to also not miss out on financial aid. And so how Beyond Barnard can help you through this personal statement process, it's really thinking through like a lot of the brainstorming. So talking through maybe some of the responses to the brainstorming questions that were up a little bit earlier, helping you decide which draft ideas may be the strongest ones for you to tease out more. Also, thinking through what you could save for later. And then we can be the final set of eyes. Essentially all of these questions boil down to, does this make sense? Do these things work? Do these essays work together? Are you saying things that you should or should not be saying in a personal statement? Because that sometimes happens. Does everything fit? Does everything provide a new piece of information that also doesn't contradict some of the others? And if you need additional edits, if you're a current student, writing fellows are around, but also just generally for everyone, professors, your recommenders are people who say that they'll write your recommendation letter are often very invested in you being successful, and we'll look over personal statement, diversity statement drafts, all of that. And just people who are strong writers. So people maybe on this call, you get a writing workshop together, that wouldn't be uncommon and unheard of. But yeah, like having other people look over your work and providing some of those comments, since you often know what you want to say, especially in the later drafts, it's good to have other sets of eyes. And so take home points outside of drafts are your friend, which I will say till the cows come home, and I don't see them coming home anytime soon. Just know that not all of your good ideas will be good for the personal statement. It's sometimes very hard to push them away, push them aside, but just know that sometimes they may have to fit in somewhere else in your application, and that's okay. Be authentic and honest. They're really everything. They're definitely part of this process. And then center yourself in your writing, in this essay, and also just as you move through your application process, because there are a lot of competing demands. And so if this is something that you really want to do and really want to do right now, then it's something that should be prioritized, and you should also be prioritized. So thank you for listening. And feel free to ask any questions. I'm going to stop the share, but still record. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute or put them in the chat.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you so much for this. This is really helpful. I am a little bit older. I graduated now 4 years ago, and I will be a reapplicant this coming cycle. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions about how to approach it from that angle. So I've already written a personal statement a couple of years ago. I've already done a lot of the application process, but I'm coming at it from 2 additional years of experience with a different kind of mindset. So how would you approach like the brainstorming aspect, addressing the reapplication, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think focusing, so in terms of like brainstorming, I think one question that you may want to add to your brainstorm is what's different right now. So like where were you when you applied a few years ago? What was that mindset? What was it like? And it could just be revisiting those documents. And then, just brainstorm what has changed and see if that intersection point of like this experience that you've received since you applied the last time, if that warrants either brand new essays, brand new documents, or if you want to update your old documents. I personally think writing new ones is always a good idea. And especially if you're saying that you're approaching it with a different mindset and kind of a different vibe to you, then that could be the best bet. Would probably be to write new ones, but as you brainstorm, think about the old ones and really hone in. If you're applying to schools that you've applied to in the past, for sure, then you'll want to hone in on those key differences. And I wouldn't frame your personal statement with, hi, you might remember me, this is how it's different, but because likely reapplicants, there are usually other pieces that you have to write, or even in that addendum, talk about that there. And so I wouldn't put it in your personal statement. I think just focusing on who you are now and how you can answer those guiding personal statement questions, and then see where else they want you to discuss that reapplicant bit.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Are there other questions? Where are you all in the personal statement process? And you can just pop into the chat. Like, do you have ideas that you're working on already? Or are you just like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this, so let me start thinking about it now?
So
Curious.
I actually gave a speech earlier this year for this thing called World Contraceptive Day. And it was a very, very personal speech. And so I was thinking about adapting it to be my personal statement, because I feel like it really shows kind of like my background, what was, I guess, formative for me, like in my youth, how it shaped my interest in reproductive health and healthcare policy. And also, I guess, being able to, be a lawyer and implement it at a large scale. So I was thinking about adapting, a speech that I wrote about just, I guess, contraceptive care and like disparate health policies around contraceptive care, and how important it is to, have policies that support sex ed, like in middle school and in people's youth, to really, I guess, shape their futures.
Yeah, so I think that's a good approach. I would say having that to start off with, and then seeing how it could adapt. You could adapt it I would say don't be married to your initial text, because so
Okay.
often folks are like, I have this thing, I'm gonna make it work. And then it's like, it doesn't work. And it's okay if it doesn't work for the personal statement, but having that general sense of like, this is the direction that you're going in, and kind of having that to refer back to make sure that the inflection points are still there and the points that you're trying to make are still, coming through in your personal statement. I think for you would be the best writing strategy.
Okay. I also don't have a copy of the speech, so I think that might help not be attached to, the what's on the paper, but just kind of invoke that emotion when I'm trying to remember what it was about. But yeah, that's my idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's good that it's not written down, honestly.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, and say there's a question in the chat. So let me get to that, and then we can, if no one else has anything, we can come on back to you. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So the question, do you have any advice for first years interested in pre-law? Any classes I should be taking now or majors to consider? So, I mean, the whole meaningful piece is really important. And I think I would encourage some non-first years on here who are more into the application could chime in as well. But specific classes, I think anything that will help you read and write and comprehend, because that's what law school is. It's a lot of writing, a lot of reading comprehension, a lot of understanding and analyzing data and information mostly. But also things that challenge your thinking. So things that help you understand perhaps the place of that law has had in our society. If there are specific things that you're interested in, seeing if you can find classes that can help you study them through a legal lens. In terms of majors, law school doesn't care really what your major is. It really kind of focus on the why law school, why now, and also having a high GPA and high LSAT scores. So any major that you're interested in tends to boost your GPA. That's typically how that goes. And so I think it's just, what are some things, think really critically about the things that interest you, the things that you want to know more about, and then seek out classes that look at things through a legal lens or a social lens that you maybe haven't been exposed to before, or haven't had to really think about yet. So that's a good question. Did anyone else want to chime in on that?
When I was a freshman, I forget if it was from like a peer or a professor, but they kind of told me to measure in what you're getting the best grades in. And not just because like that class is easy to you and you're getting good grades in it, but getting good grades kind of shows you that you are interested in and invested in that class and in that topic, and that you're going to enjoy your 4 years and not be really stressed out or pursuing a major that you're not interested in. And two, by the time you get to the end of your college career, you know that you kind of gave it your best shot in terms of having a strong GPA, because that's really important to get into, especially top law schools.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out to Beyond Barnard for these brainstorming ideas, if you want to talk through with us, or just any other aspects about pre-law, just the application, about picking schools, things like that. We are here to help and happy to do it. So have a good sunshiny day, again, if you're in the New York area, but wherever you are, just have a good one and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.